to see you.
You're walking pretty good.
Yeah.
Hello.
Thanks a lot. Hi. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Jerry, where?
How are you? Good.
Pleased to meet you.
Nothing much. Just stuff by myself. Well, I know stuff.
You got to say hi to my neighbor here too.
I talked to the professor.
Good to see you. Have they quiet your end of the neighborhood?
Yes, and the dog is at home. Sad.
All right, well, I just got to make sure. You need something, you know.
So,
I slept up and
Hi, Dr. Mel.
no, I haven't been very strong in history. Just like I saw the professor.
You know what, I need to start resting on you. You know something, at my age, I can go any way I want. It's comfortable. You notice, these I wear if I'm in a touch. See, I could wear my gym shoes. I wore those, these are the only shoes. You should have called me. You should have called me. See, retirement's not a bad thing.
It's a book.
You wear it well.
Great Gatsby.
How you keep them so thin?
Why not?
She doesn't eat. You no pizza? Yeah. Hi, how are you? Nice to see you.
Testing.
Very.
How's it going?
He's good. He was sad that he couldn't come.
Yeah, mine too. Nice to go everywhere I go.
That's exactly what I do. The dog. Starbucks lets him in there.
I take mine everywhere. I've got he's a,
Karen Jerry.
well, no, he's a service dog, but I've got him, it's part your interior, part toy food, and the cutest thing.
Well, my schnauzer is
Yeah, that's what they are. My dog actually takes over my doctor. It is, it's true. It's true. My dog balances the energy.
that's wonderful.
I'm telling you.
Well, my dog knows there's
My dog,
stuff.
you pet my dog for 15 seconds, and your energy will balance. And it's improving. I want to go and sit. I can stretch my leg out. Yeah. I'm not sure what you're okay.
That's in there.
I can't hear you. I do. Since I've seen someone. I am so sorry. Actually, on the way here from the cemetery, I drove around our neighborhood and I pointed out her house. Judy, this is when I drive by my house. It was really funny. After my mom got it, somebody bought it. They moved out. The family moved. And I was waiting for you. And she found me on Facebook. And they were doing renovations in the on the walls, my brother's in. So she took pictures. And I see the house. And I was there since I was 2 years old. Okay. So I can roll it. I know more young people are living in that area.
They had like an open house and everything.
Over there, the service zone.
Friends, Baruchim Habaim Lechvod Hametim. Blessed be each and every one of you who come to render honor unto the dead and to bring comfort to a mourning family. I want to welcome you to the house that Irv built. So appropriate that we gather here in this beautiful domed prayer space that you can't hear. Well, that's interesting because I can. They didn't teach me in rabbinic school how to turn up the volume, so I will just speak louder. Can you hear, Irv? Okay, turn up your hearing aids. He says with his own hearing aids. We come into this space after having seen Dorothy to her final rest on that beautiful cemetery on the hill. We had the opportunity to take care of her final needs, and now we come together to take care of our final needs for her. This will be an opportunity for us not only to say the appropriate prayers and meditations, but also to share thoughts and memories about her life and how she impacted your lives. So we begin at this time with words of the Psalms. I'm pleased to invite Chazan Braun forward.
Adonai, Madam, Vateidaehu, Ben Enosh, Vatchashveihu, Adam, Lahevel Dama, Yamav, Ketzei Uveir, Baboker Yatzitz V'chalaf, La'erev Yemolel V'yavesh, Limnot Yameinu Kein Hodam V'navi Levav Chochmah.
Adonai, what are human beings that you take account of them, mortals that you care for them? Humans are as a breath, their days like a passing shadow. In the morning they flourish anew, in the evening they are gone. Teach us to count each day, that we may acquire a heart of wisdom.
From Psalm 16, Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, ki mimini bal emot, lachein samach libi v'yagel kavodi, af besari yishkon lavetach, ki lo ta'azov nafshi lish'ol, lo titein v'chasidcha lir'ot shachat. I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side. I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure, for you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. These beautiful words of the psalmist in this place when we come to express our mourning and confront the sense of loss, what can it mean to say that enduring happiness and joy is our gift? And of course, it's because of the memory of one who was precious to us, who found in this place a home, in this community a home, and in our hearts a place of refuge. It is the obligation of the preacher to do a hesped, to do a eulogy. And the tradition teaches us that one should give a eulogy that causes the mourners to weep. Because, as I said at the cemetery, we do not sanitize death. Rather, we confront the difficulties of losing one who is precious to us, of taking care of those final needs, and then coming together so that we can move forward. So I thought at some length about what are the approaches that I, as one who will give one of the eulogies, could take. And when you think about it, I could simply say 95, 76, and sit down. And there'd be some people who would say, yes. 95 years, a life filled with time to spend with her husband, her children and grandchildren, and her community. 76 years of marriage takes my breath away. Honest to God, and I mean that literally, I aspire to be her, and I aspire to be you, Irv. So that's one approach that we could take. There is another approach that we could take, and that is to tell Dorothy stories, of which there are many. I have one. I mentioned it to the family when we gathered yesterday to talk about this service. Some years ago, I don't remember the social gathering, but we were at a place in which hors d'oeuvres were being served, and people were walking around with the little plates, and little cocktail napkins. And Dorothy walked up to me, she looked at my plate, took something off, tasted it, and then put it back on my plate. So there are many Dorothy stories that we could tell. When I got my rabbi's manual, because we don't do anything from memory, it's all in the book. And I tell you that assuming that you won't know where to buy it, so I'll still have work to do. My wife pointed out that in my rabbi's manual, I carry this little piece of paper. Many, many years ago, decades ago, I did a wedding up in Akron at Stan Hewitt Hall. And I got there early, and on the floor outside the bridal room, I found this little tag. It must have fallen off the bride's dress. And this is what it said. The slight irregularities in this weave are characteristic of the fabric and are not to be considered flaws. So anything that was eccentric in Dorothy, anything that came out of left field or perhaps right field, is not to be considered a flaw, but is certainly a part of who we know as Dorothy Rudick. It's part of the fabric of her life. So I could do that. That would also be something, an approach that I could take. I could take the approach of what our sages said with regards to a woman of valor. You might remember from Proverbs these words which were recited usually at every Jewish woman's funeral until it was too much. The Eshet Chayil. And these are the words. A woman of valor who can find, for she is more precious than pearls. Her husband trusts in her, and so he lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm, all the days of her life. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need and extends her hands to the poor. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her tongue. Her children rise up and bless her. Her husband sings her praises. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel them all. Each one of those phrases is an aspect of Dorothy's life. So we could take this approach and talk about the values and activities that she lived. And indeed, as you try to categorize those activities of industry, of love, of concern, of caring, you would be able to say that Dorothy Rudick was Eshet Chayil on steroids. The phrase that was used when we spoke yesterday was that she was a force of nature. So I could take that approach. The approach that I'm going to take is not the coward's way out, but the easy way out. As we spoke yesterday, we talked about the idea that her family, her children and grandchildren, not just related to Dorothy, but they knew her so very, very well. And they are so articulate in remembering things about her and about the things that they did together that what we're going to do now is to have an opportunity to hear from family members and let them share what they remember and will cherish with them for her life, for now and always. So our first speakers today will be her children, Jim and Leslie. Can I invite you forward?
There's not enough food, guys. We expected 50 people here. And Cousin Marilyn said no. But sorry about that. Anyway, I'm Jim. I'm Dorothy. Can you hear me okay now? Yeah, I'm Jim. I'm Dorothy's son. And yesterday we met with Rabbi Spitzer, and he advised us, as you know, in the Jewish tradition, that a proper eulogy involves equal parts praise, or chesed, and tears of lament, called beki. I think that's how I pronounce it. And as you probably already know from the rabbi, from the words you're about to hear from our family, and doubtless from your own experience, Mom won first prize in the praise category. And as far as the tears, well, they come in different flavors. There's tears of sorrow, tears of joy, and of course, tears of laughter. Well, when I held my hand up to her cheek, her cold cheek as she was lying in bed about an hour after she died, suddenly I became a motherless child. The tears came. Well, that was the first kind. But I'm not sure that's what brings us here today. If she was any other mortal, it would be appropriate to speak about a life well lived, about the righteous woman, which of course she was, but that's not the point. And in my desperation, I asked Professor Google to suggest a few thousand quotes from famous, articulate people who could express what I was feeling about Mom, but they were all inspiring, and some beautiful, and some sad, some hilarious. None of them fit. That's because I believe Mom was nothing like anybody or anyone else I've seen or known about ever. At times I was convinced she came from the planet Zebulon. Yeah. And growing up, she was this frenetic, as we said, force of nature. That's a good description. Exploding everywhere, all the time. Not a noun, she was a verb. That's my dad's words. And our house was sort of a beehive of activity growing up. She brought homeless, lonely, and depressed people into our lives. She fed, clothed, and more than once found them a spouse. And I learned one more spouse Mike and Pam Dixon just told me today that she was responsible for them getting together. So this keeps coming. And most of the time, her efforts were well received, though occasionally she was like the Boy Scout who insisted on helping a little old lady across the street, even though she didn't want to go. And she was fearless. She had no fear of authority, prestige, or rank. She befriended members of the Spanish royal family. Believe that, when I was in Spain in the Navy, she got to be friends with some duchess out of nowhere. She found her way into an Estee Lauder wedding, and she even took over the Akron-Canton airport for my dad's 60th birthday. She took over the airport, but the party was to take place aboard a Boeing 727, which is parked at the gate. And until the effort was quashed by a horrified airport administrator. We still had the party. And Jim Zidai, who's here in the right here, was part of that celebration, and he played his saxophone with this group. Do you remember that, Jim? Yep. Okay. And speaking of people our neighbor, Suzanne Hawes, who I see in the back somewhere, told me the other day that an acquaintance of hers, I've never heard this story before, needed a heart transplant. And somehow Mom found him a heart. It's hard to separate reality from myth, but in her case, I don't think there's any difference. My dad once remarked that my mom was the only person he knew who could go into an empty room and create utter chaos. So she took college courses in psychology, and she sang in the Canton Civic Opera. She worked the suicide hotline. She volunteered for all sorts of community projects, all the while raising us and selling half the houses in Canton, of course. And she had a huge impact, for better or for worse, and mostly for better, on just about everybody she touched. And she was such a caricature of herself that often at various family simchas, we'd get together and we'd roast her with irreverent songs. One little quirk of hers was her delight in hearing bad news. She was fascinated by the dark side, so a typical song, excuse my singing, goes like this. Kvetch maker, make me a kvetch, make me a pain, make me a wretch. Night after night I've been feeling so good, so make me feel sad, make me feel bad, make me a cad, if you could. Yeah. Anyway, so once she fell asleep in the bathtub, which overflowed, so he sang about the great flood. Another song celebrated the time she microwaved her cell phone. And once, a real estate broker, a colleague of hers, sent her a ham, didn't know she was Jewish, and Grandma Fanny, who lived with us and kept kosher, took askance to the whole thing, so my mom decided she'd salt it down. Well, what I'm trying to say is that Mom was a very strong, driven woman who tried to change the world, and I know that she was hugely successful most of the time, and it was for the better most of the time. And when I think back about the tumult and the chutzpah and the hilarity and the delight and occasionally the terror, growing up with Mom was quite a ride. And my eyes are now watering with when I think back, and those are the tears of the second kind. So, if we might borrow a time machine, say from Elon Musk, and take this funeral back about 30 years, I'd bet you'd find a sea of humanity, standing room only, who come to pay their respects. Well, this is a pretty good crowd. But, she's outlived most of us, and here we are, the rest of us on this mountaintop, just a few of us left with our memories. So Mom may be gone, but she's become a part of all of us. Thanks.
So first of all, you can tell that Jim and I are related because I can tear up half of this. We were thinking the same thing. And you're right, my mother would be horrified that there wouldn't be enough food today. It would not be a good thing. So, I like to read obituaries, particularly in the New York Times. When I do, I learn about people I will never meet, but who have lived productive, fascinating, sometimes exotic lives, often much more interesting than my own. These obituaries can be paragraphs or even columns long. But when we lose people and time goes by, our descriptions of those we've lost can be reduced to a story here or there, or even just a few words. It seems impossible to sum up a whole life that way, but in fact, that's what often happens. So when I think about my wonderful, beautiful mother, I'm trying to imagine what my children's children will know of her. Obviously, like all of us, she was a complex individual with many attributes, frailties, and contradictions. She was smart, funny, sometimes outrageous, and infinitely kind. She constantly worried about her husband and her children, but was fearless herself. So how do I condense all of that life and personality into just one adjective? I, like my brother, went to Google. I tried, and I also couldn't find the right word to capture the essence of Dorothy for those who will never know her. So I'll offer you two essential characteristics. The first, she was a true friend. My mother was not the casual kind of friend who asked how you were as a cursory question. She met absolutely people everywhere. Once she met a man on an elevator, and by the time they got to the 10th floor, they had exchanged names and phone numbers. And the next thing I heard was that she'd invited him to Canton, and she was fixing him up on dates. It's true, remember that? You've heard the phrase, there are friends for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. My mother was a friend for life. She collected friends like some people collected fine wines. And here's the second thing I'd like to tell you. She helped people. Now that sounds simple, but when I think about it, it's actually quite profound. She helped people. And yes, she was the go-to person when one needed a plumber or orchestra tickets or a colonoscopy. But she was also the person who would find you a house, then help you move in, decorate it, find schools for your kids, a job for your wife, then have a dinner party to introduce you to your neighbors. My family and I have a million such stories about my mom, and I imagine that many of you do as well. But I'll leave you with actually one example. Jim just mentioned one that I heard. I also heard the thing about finding a gentleman of heart, but this morning, someone walked up to me, I don't know if he's still here, and said, apparently my mother's good friend was having some major health issues, and she was not getting the medical attention that she needed. So my mother called the state senator, who called the CEO of the hospital, and it went on from there. Needless to say, this woman was well taken care of. So I will say, in closing, I have boundless admiration and love for my mother, and I will miss her forever.
Most of us here have grandchildren. Grandchildren are the blessings of our lives. They take our arms when we need them. They make us laugh when we need them. They make us proud when we need to be proud. And they eat up all of our money. We're going to hear from grandchildren now. And from the time that we spent together around the dining room table at Irv's home, I can tell you that they are articulate and they have wonderful memories to share. So we'll hear from AJ, who's Andrea, then Ben, and then Dina.
All right, I guess I'm still AJ, but hi guys, I'm Andrea, or AJ. I am the granddaughter via Leslie, and I'm really thankful for all of you guys for showing up to help us remember, mourn, and pay our respects to Grandma. You guys all know her as Dorothy, Dottie, perhaps Dorsey, maybe even Dodo. But to me, she was my cookie lady. Every time we talked, I would say, "Hi, my cookie lady." And she would say, "You're my cookie lady." And she wasn't wrong. I don't want to speak for long today because properly talking about what she meant to me, to all of us, and all of the stories, crazy stories that we have of hers over the years, it would require an all-nighter, at least 3 rites, and probably all of the red ink that my grandparents had in their household. But what I do want to say is the other day, I'm sure a lot of you, as well as my family, all read her obituary. And no offense to whoever decided how obituaries should be written, but I hated it. It said who she was related to and what she did, but it didn't say anything about who she was. And already from my Uncle Jim and from my mom and from the rabbi, you've gotten some of those stories, and I'm guessing every single one of you has some of those as well. But when I read that obituary, I just thought about how much personality she has, and I needed to rectify it. So, even before we had figured out when the memorial service would be and the burial, before we talked about actually giving eulogies or anything like that, I started writing. So, if you will, I would love to provide you an alternative obituary. Dorothy Rudick died an incredibly kooky lady at the not-so-young age of 95. She was a wife, mother, and a grandma who never ceased to show up for her family. In fact, this past year was the first time she ever told my mom that she just couldn't make it down to Cincinnati for a visit. And I remember my mom was shocked. She was always showing up. She will be remembered for always being on the go, getting into endless arts and crafts projects and never finishing them, FaceTiming you, but you could only see the top of her forehead, microwaving her cell phone, sending back food at restaurants and potchkeying with whatever food was in front of her, running around like an Energizer bunny and then falling asleep sitting up on the couch or in the bathtub, one of the two, threatening to throw food away if you didn't eat more, her now Oster Family Award-winning apple pie, trying to matchmake everybody, including apparently me. Thank you for sharing some of that from you guys today. Constantly telling her family all of the reasons that they are wonderful, but also at the same time, all of the reasons that whatever you're trying to do was too hard and you shouldn't do that. Helping everyone, even if they didn't remotely ask for her help, although frequently they did, and befriending everyone she met. Our family danced her away in celebration of her life, drank kaka, which is what we call scotch, in her name, and we are working on collectively depleting at least 5 tissue boxes by the end of the weekend. Somehow, I'm shocked I'm not crying. It's just all so surreal. But I love you, my kooky lady.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm Jim's son. I was honored to help carry the casket today, and as I was doing so, I could imagine Grandma's spirit hovering all over us, saying things like, "That's too heavy. Sit down, take a rest. I'm fine here in this box. You look thin. Would you like something to eat?" 25 years ago, almost to the day, I was bar mitzvahed in this room. And they say that's when you become an adult. I can't say that I've only felt adult until very recently, but I think I'm there. I'm 38, I've got 3 little kids, and I drive a minivan. Pretty sure I'm an adult. And part of that is learning what gives you joy and what you're here for. And I think I've figured that out. and let me know if any of these sound familiar. The first for me is community. I'm proud to say that I'm that neighbor that will accost you on the street as you're moving in. And if I haven't met you, someone else is going to point you my way as the guy to connect you in and find you what you need, and probably try to feed you dinner, which is the second thing, feeding people. People come over, I tell them, I say, I don't know if you're thirsty or hungry, but until I give you something, I'm not going to calm down and feel okay. That probably sounds familiar when you think of Grandma. 2 weeks ago, I came to Ohio by myself. I was planning to come with my whole family in 2 weeks from now, but I got advised that she wasn't doing so well, and if I wanted to be with her, I needed to come. And I'm so glad that I did. I had a wonderful 9 hours of nonstop talking with Grandma and Grandpa, mostly about all of you. And I think it was hard for her because she knew who she was, and she knew how glamorous and forceful and strong and connected she was, and she felt diminished in those last couple years, and it was hard. But I got to tell her that she showed me what it was to live a life centered on people, on community, on family, and what it meant to welcome people in. And so I frequently have random dinner parties at my house with 20 neighbors that I feed them from whatever's in the fridge, and it's bordering on chaos, and people say, how do you do this? And I say, how do I do this? You've never met my grandmother. I am descended from the gold medal Olympian of schmoozing. And so I really am proud to carry that piece of her forward in my life and in my work, and even in her great-grandchildren. And I see it in my children. My son Micah, who's 5 years old, came home from school the other day with a business card because he wanted a play date with a kid and couldn't figure out how to meet the mom, and found her in the hallway and got her business card and brought it home so he could have a play date. I'm like, this is not a normal thing for a 5-year-old to do. Anyway, I could go on forever, but I will miss her, and I am proud to carry that part of her forward. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. Hi, Grandpa. I'm Dina. And because my brother just brought up his 5-year-old, I'd like to bring up my children as well. I have a son, Wendell, and a daughter, Auden, and they are missing her too. And Wendell is quite upset, and Auden wants to know what will be on my grandmother's tombstone. And she has a suggestion, which she thought of with no prompting and no thinking. She said her tombstone should say, "I was full of courage, and I know my children will care for my children's children." They miss her. I've been preparing for my grandmother's death since I was a child, dreaming about, emotionally rehearsing, steeling myself for the day that would eventually arrive when I would continue living and my grandmother would not. But I have no idea really where to start this tribute, and certainly no notion of how to conclude. I am not ready to tie things neatly and archive this chapter. I don't feel ready to say goodbye. Dorothy Rudick was so much and so many things to countless people. Fixer, broker, banker, baker, cousin, matchmaker, meddler, consultant, organizer, advocate, shopper, hero, menace, matriarch. Every one of these captures a truth. And Dorothy was my grandmother, but she was also so much more than that to me. She was my lioness, my Kingsguard, my occasionally misguided stylist, my blindly loyal champion, my critic, my caution conscience, my family minder. I arrived on the scene in 1980, born to a gifted family, full of love. But there were also some big gaps at that time. Grandma saw this and threw herself bodily into each one, creating bridges for me wrought of sheer will, and she never stopped. Fierce and frustrating. These words go together in my memory of the grandmother who helped raise me. She refused to let me slip and instead insistently thrust me forward, sometimes less than willingly, always in the back of her blue Oldsmobile and then later in her gold Avalon. Our sensibilities have never completely aligned. And even though my choices frustrated her, "You're dating him? I like your hair blonder. You're working too hard. Don't run at night. I wish you'd stop traveling to dangerous places." She just adored me in the most completely irrational, immeasurable, constant way. Her love felt like the sun. So hot, so bright, such a primal force of nature. And sometimes I sought shade. But even in this shade, I could close my eyes and imagine the beaming brilliance of her love, and I would return. I'd pick up the phone, hop on a plane, knock on her door, hear her voice, field her many opinions, hug her tiny, bony body, and look into her huge, watery gray eyes, feel her sun. I know I'm lucky to have had her for all of my 42 years. We traveled the world together. She knew and loved my husband and children. She taught me how to make apple pie, how to prioritize family, how to find my way. But instead of arriving at this moment, armed with grateful detachment, I feel bereaved, dislocated, disbelieving almost. Like, I know no one lives forever, but she was living forever. And I knew it couldn't continue, but couldn't it? In her final weeks, she knew that her body was giving up. Her spirit was not finished, but she became resigned that even her grit had limits. Maybe it was this mismatch between her steely fervor and her frailty that caused her to despair that there was more to do. And there is, Grandma. There is so much more to do. More causes to champion, people to help, pies to bake, matches to make, curtains to hang, socks to buy, Davenports to move. socks to return, people to help, just like you did. But you've done so much for so long, and we will take it from here. I promise. We will take your sun and shine it every which way we can think of for as long as we can. And we will probably do it a little wrong, but we will try so damn hard, just like you did. I promise this with all my heart. I will teach my children everything you taught me and carry your spirit forward. So instead of saying goodbye, because I simply cannot, each of these moments will be my hello to you, and I will always love you.
'95 and '76. The wisdom of '95 has come through the humor of the remembrances and stories of children and grandchildren. If children remember, grandchildren bear that meaning into the next generation. What beautiful words. Could any of us here want to have better memories than that when our family and friends and community think about us when our time is over? I'm very grateful for those who have spoken and shared what those 95 years meant. But now we have to focus on the 76. When we were talking yesterday, Irv pulled out a card that he had given to Dorothy. And it had some things in it that he had composed. So it's going to be, I think, a poignant conclusion for him to read that card. It's going to take just a moment. Come on.
I guess I made it. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, we all came prepared to respect and speak a little bit about our loss. But after watching what was going on here, the very most important thing that she ever did for me was to give me the family that I have, and we have all been there. Anyhow, I was trying to think of something to reiterate, and I went back to some card things, and I found an old card, birthday card, for Dorothy, and I think it was for her 75th birthday. And we're talking recent, and we don't remember much about what happened in those days. But anyhow, I found a card. The title of the card says Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman. And that's pretty close. And then I write here, happy birthday from an amazed and loving husband. And I just wanted to read a few of the items on the birthday card, which tries to tell you a little bit about what she was like, or what kind of person we had here. So these are the list of a short, partial list of items that I would have had, but most of them start with, Dorothy, help me. And that's what everybody knows about Dorothy, is she was a success anyhow. So I try to itemize a few things, and here are some of the few, but not all of the things. Dorothy says, find me a wife, find me a husband, find me a lawyer, find me a companion. And these are all true. I mean, these are things that have happened, I wrote down, okay. Find me a house sitter, find me a driver, find me someone to clean my house, find me a doctor for arthritis, find me a place to get good carpet, find me a seamstress, find me a carpentry, find me a decorator, find me a school for my kids in Hilton Head, find me a place to fix my air conditioner, find me a restaurant you can't get into. Which, and I could go on for a long time, but we're trying to reach the people that knew her some time ago and knew her forever, can possibly add to my list and appreciate, but this is something we will all miss. Thank you for here.
So it is the obligation of the eulogizer to find an approach. And I suggested to you a number of different ones. But I'm thinking now that the combination of two of them captures the life and the meaning of Dorothy Rudick. There was the approach of the Eshet Chayil, the woman of valor. And in those words, the expression of what the stereotypical Jewish woman should be, that we find the true meaning of Dorothy's life. And then there are the stories, of which there are many. And it is in the stories that that meaning becomes memorable. In a few moments after our memorial prayers, we'll have an opportunity to go into the center room for a luncheon. And it'll be an opportunity for us not only to offer words of consolation to the family, but to continue to tell the stories about that time that Dorothy said or did or wanted. And in those stories, we will truly draw close to us the memory of Dorothy Rudick. The time has come for memorial prayers. Cantor Braun will lead us in the Kel Moli Rachamim. Let us rise.
El malei rachamim shochein bamromim amtsei menucha nechona tachat kanafei השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזכירים את נשמת תבורך בת ינקוף עגלה שהלכה לעולמה בגן עדן תהי מנוחתה הסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, בצרור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Devorah Rachel bat Yankul Fegele, Dorothy Rudick, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life, and may she rest in peace. And we say, Amen. Now we have the words of the mourner's Kaddish. If you're not a mourner, you may be seated. Continue. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayei chon uv'yomei chon uv'chayei v'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kari v'yimaru. Amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lomei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'richu le'ela bin kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'yimaru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya B'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru. Amen. This concludes our service. The meal of consolation will be in the room on the other side of the wall.
We ask you to remain in your seats while the family exits the sanctuary. And when we get into the other room, if you'd kindly refrain from taking food until we have an opportunity for the motzi, and the family has an opportunity to go first. Shall we go?
Yes.